So one of the fundamental aspects of this ecosystem we're in is the ability to design the chips that we all use. For those of you who follow the channel regularly, you'll know that I'll cover a variety of companies building the latest and greatest generation chips on leading edge process nodes with the most advanced packaging available. If you've ever spent any time thinking about that, you'll have to understand that the software to design these chips is arguably more complex than the chips themselves. And that's the thing, it's even getting more complex. Once we add in GPU compute, once we add in machine learning, it turns out that every chip you've bought in the last few years is probably been 50% designed with the help of machine learning. Now, I'm here at Synopsys Converge. This is their big annual conference, bringing together all the great parts of Synopsys and their partners to talk about it. You've seen me cover other shows similar to this, like TSMC's Open Innovation Platform and Intel Foundry Connect. But one thing is, a couple of years ago, I interviewed their former CEO, Art de Gois. We had a great conversation on this channel about where EDA is going. I've got a few minutes to speak to new CEO Sassine Ghazi, and we've literally both just come off stage.
Yes.
You guys had me and Sally do a little pre-show, warm up the crowd for you.
That was a lot of fun, by the way.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. But you were also on stage doing all your announcements today. If you want to go find out those announcements, we'll put a bunch of links in the description so you can find out. But what I want to understand from you, Sassine, is given the nature of chip design, it's accelerating, right? We're all seeing it. Companies are now not only producing more products, but are producing more volume of products out there. How is your business changing?
So you're right. From complexity and pace, that exponential is getting steeper and steeper. If we go back 15, 20 years ago, we followed Moore's Law. Our customers own their architecture. We provided the software for them to enable the architecture to implement the chip. And then the customer themselves with the foundry partner of their choice and manufacture the chip. About 10-ish years ago or so, the complexity between design and manufacturing became more complex. We played a role in optimizing between design and technology. You look at the chips today with the requirements of AI. The architectures, flavors are rapidly evolving. The complexity of getting to the power, the performance needed is not anymore following Moore's Law. So there are different approaches to do it. Advanced packaging, multi-die, etc. You need a very sophisticated EDA and you need tremendous number of IP to connect these chips together. We're in a unique position that we lead in the EDA technology and we have the broadest IP portfolio. So from a business point of view, the market, our customers, they've been spending more percentage of their R&D on that automation. So it's been helping Synopsys and the industry quite well, given the complexity and the pace of that innovation.
So you're finding that it sounds like time to market is becoming very critical for your customers.
Yeah, because reducing the time to design the chip. It used to be 18 to 24 months. Now you see customers are working on a 1-year rhythm to deliver a new silicon. That 1-year rhythm, it just means more pressure on everything they do from their workflow, and be it the software that we're providing or new techniques in order to shrink the design time.
It's one of the things I brought up this morning is one of the first companies that integrated chiplets through heterogeneous integration. And the difficulty they had at the time doing that because there were very few tools available, and these are sort of the tools that your company produces.
Yeah.
So as it pertains to 3D chips, multi-stacking, 2.5D, we've seen a number of announcements from leading packaging players, going beyond micron level. How have you? It sounds like a really crappy PR question, but how have you embraced the chiplet era?
We enabled it, not only embraced it. Because if you think back to architecture, as you disaggregate from a monolithic to a chiplet, you don't do this manually. Which part of the chip goes on which technology node? Where do you put it in the stack if you're stacking in 3D? What is the memory role in it? We have the technology called 3D IC compiler, where you start from a spec and architecting that advanced package, chiplet, whatever you want to call it, and do what-if analysis. If I use 5 nanometer for this versus 3, what do I get in terms of power, et cetera, et cetera. Then the connectivity between these chips is a whole new other level of complexity. That's where UCIe got born. That's where right now you have the PCIe, the HBM, et cetera, to connect that system together. So from an opportunity point of view, is a fantastic opportunity. Where the new things we're seeing is not only semiconductor companies are designing these chips. The hyperscalers themselves are moving from a general purpose to some ASIC to COT that they're needing.
I think Meta just put out a big post this morning about their next generation chips.
Yeah, but almost every one of these hyperscale, you need to, not because the other two options are not good enough. The time and the customization that you need in order to get the best experience is what's driving those customers to do it.
So when it comes to, so you've got your 3D IC compiler, and if we just, accept it as, a blob at this stage, is that something that you think is born out of customer requirements, or that's something that you guys already had a project ongoing internally to deliver?
Okay.
Because I'm trying to think timelines here. When do they incept?
We see things very, very early with the customer. So a 3D IC compiler actually is a great example. Around 2017 timeframe, we could see customers are looking for a different architecture, different package in order to achieve the better performance, the power, etc., to deliver to that future, and not only leaning on Moore's law as only the next wave to achieve the leap ahead.
Yeah.
So we started exploring, developing the technology back then, before the first adoption was around 3-4 years later. Now, as the first adoption started coming, then we discovered there's a new challenge, which is physics. As the customer started exploring and manufacturing before going to production, they're like, wait a minute, thermal is becoming a key issue. Warpage, a cracking of these die as we're packaging them. So physics needed to be integrated, and that's where we embarked on truly transforming our company with the acquisition of Ansys.
So on that front, especially with thermals. Now I've done some research, and I go back and I found a bunch of IBM patents on intra-chip cooling that they did back in the 90s and the 2000s. So I can only imagine that the next stage, as we look at multi-stacked chips, is you're going to have intra-chip cooling.
Yes.
And you guys are going to have to model that for your customers.
Exactly. Beyond modeling, when you look at the chip, there are certain hotspots on the chip.
Yeah.
So you don't want to over-design the chip. So do you have visibility over the software that's going to run on that chip?
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
So you can design just right. So you're not over-designing, so it's not too expensive.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's not heating up when you run a certain corner case.
Yeah. So if you've got a workload that attacks the ALUs or the memory in this certain way, can you design for that workload? But then you might end up with a workload-specific chip.
But otherwise you just over-design. And when you over-design, it's not only expensive and takes time. The chip is not competitive, because you're building so much margin between the different functions of the chip. Actually, today, what we announced, the multiphysics fusion, is how do you bring in that physics models during the design phase. So you take into account the IR, the thermal, the electromagnetic, the mechanical. So you're designing just right. So you, instead of an over-design, you're co-designing with it. We introduced that concept, by the way, with the Fusion platform.
Yep.
But 10 years ago, the challenge was less physics. It was the how do I close the timing on the chip? How do I close the power on the chip?
Yeah, especially if you're trying to get timing between multiple chips in the same stack. And,
exactly.
The overheads and therein. If you like this content, there are multiple ways to support the channel. You can like and subscribe this video, and many thanks for doing so. There's also Patreon, which gives you access to our Discord. There's a merchandise store and a newsletter, links in the description. For all of you who do contribute, thank you. You are keeping me well fed. Does waferscale present any additional problems?
The challenge is more, how do we model on the manufacturing side at the device physics level?
Right.
Then at the packaging level, at the architecture level, if you're designing it with that architecture, is this the best representation of the physics that you're going to manufacture with?
Yeah.
So in a way, in a sense, yes, but from a Synopsys point of view, we look at it as a DTCO, design technology co-optimization, with the various flavors and models of the physics, and what is our foundry partner is going to be providing as a solution.
So in terms of that, normally when we think of EDA and especially IP, right, getting it to work on a specific process node, but a lot of what you've spoken about today and a lot of what we've discussed is almost process node agnostic.
Yes.
Right. So how much do the foundry players get involved?
It's true for IP in a sense. We have the broadest IP portfolio, but we have to provide it to our customer on the various technology nodes with various foundries.
Yep.
Otherwise, you're not the leader in IP. If you say, I'm only doing it for that one node with that foundry, then the customers will end up building their own IP.
Yep.
So the work we do with multiple foundry requires a lot of close partnership and collaboration with the foundry, because we're there at a very early stage of their PDK development, etc. Same on the EDA tool. When we are designing Fusion Compiler, or for that matter, Primetime or RedHawk, etc., you need to know what implementation of material, of physics they're using, so you're designing the tool and the algorithm to match it.
So we're even talking, what material they're using for liners and interconnects within the chip.
Yes.
Because that's all the physics of how these metals work.
And our tool does the implementation of it.
Yep.
Because the customer has a requirement. They design it at, and I don't want to oversimplify what the customer is doing, but you kind of said it.
Yeah.
The software we provide, you can argue to some extent, is as complex as what our customer is trying to do. But we are the bridge between that architecture and can you manufacture it? And that's where the sign of strength comes in.
Yeah. So if I can ask about one particular foundry, and that's purely because I was in Japan last week and met up with them, Rapidus, right? This is the first new leading edge foundry from a new entrant into the industry. And I would argue perhaps the last I will ever see in my lifetime. But I'm sure from your perspective, it introduces a number of new challenges working with a new partner on leading edge versus somebody who's been doing it for 20 years. Can you kind of go into how you're working with them?
Yeah, actually, we have a fantastic relationship with Rapidus. Actually, when I talked to our Japanese team, I said Rapidus is a gift for us, especially as it comes to Japan as a starting point. But of course, they're not going to be foundry just for Japan. They have an ambition to be a global foundry. The reason I say it's a gift, from a technology point of view, they had a partnership or have a partnership with IBM from a process technology. We have technology called TCAD, which is modeling the device and the process technology when the technology is at the R&D level.
Yep.
So before you go even anywhere near the production volume. So we started that engagement at that level. Then as the technology started maturing, you go to the when you're doing a test chip, the representation for design is a PDK. Then you start from a 0.1 PDK, then evolve to 0.5, 0.7, etc., etc. So we've been working very closely with them on both the technology process level, to the EDA and design, and to IP.
But does it change because they're new into the industry? Because what you've just described is what you do with every foundry when they have a new node.
Yeah,
right?
but other foundry, they go from a node to node to node. There is that incremental and cumulative learning. In here, some of that cumulative learning came from their partnership with IBM. But of course, it takes longer because that's the first node that they're creating. Now, the following nodes will be exactly like other foundry. From a Synopsys investment point of view, it's a higher investment, but that's where we bring in a tremendous value to that foundry because our tools have seen from a planner to FinFET to gate all around to what have you. So we're not reinventing something in our product.
if I look back 10 years, right, and and we'd had discussion and we'd said, what's the next 20 years of EDA? We'd have arguably said more of the same, the incremental increases. But now we've got, new degrees of freedom in multiphysics and 3D IC and verification and simulation, what have you. The question then becomes, what are the next 5 years going to look like?
The reason last year we shared the framework of agentic AI, there is no question we see it as a significant opportunity. We introduced reinforcement learning in our product as general availability in the market in 2020. We started investing around 2017 with it. As I look at the last 3 years, not go back to 10 years ago, the speed in which the innovation in models, the innovation in orchestration of the models, and the opportunities it's providing, it's unbelievable. What we're doing as big part of our roadmap, you look at the entire chip workflow. What part of the chip workflow can you assign to an agent? We call them agent engineers. How much can you have an agent managing an agent, i.e. you orchestrate these agents? And what we announced earlier today is the first level of multi-agent adaptive dynamic orchestration, which is key. So these agents are learning as they're operating on new data, new requirements, on how to achieve the final goal and target. There, the innovation is going to continue at a very fast pace. The key is, which is the layer that we invested in, is to pretty much move every part of Synopsys, every product, every solver, to be with the latest AI technology, like a reinforcement learning or other technology that is available.
So you're talking about an agent calling a solver, getting a result, and examining the result, and then maybe calling the solver again.
Exactly.
And iterating.
What
and
we
learning.
have today, we have these task agents or agent engineers that the human engineer assigns them a task. They go off, they come back with an outcome. Then the human engineer needs to change, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
There's a cognitive layer. The orchestration layer can be adaptive. And that's where we have the partnership with Microsoft, with NVIDIA and other. They're doing a very good job racing ahead with that cognition layer and orchestration layer. So we're not trying to reinvent what is already out there, but what is it we need to do with our core asset, which is the solver, and bring in AI to accelerate.
You have to promise me something. Because if I was being facetious, I would say that sounds like a middle management pyramid scheme of orchestration. So as best as you can, please don't make it that middle management. It's I understand the full orchestra side. It's that I speak about this with Sally from EE Times. It's all about how much can we learn versus how much is actually ends up benefit on the table.
Yes, and that learning is so adaptive. Oh, you're talking about the agent of agents. The knowledge actually does not get reduced as you go up the agentic workflow.
Yeah,
is the opposite. The reason I was very specific in the words we used earlier today, it's a dynamic adaptive orchestration. That sophistication in technology to optimize. Actually, I was talking to a customer before my keynote. And they're one customer that they're testing these things. He said it's impossible for a human to look across that huge space.
Yeah.
So that's not an agent engineer competing with a human. Is exploring a much larger space and see what is possible. So yeah, definitely it's not a management scheme.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Sassine.
Thank you so much. Thank
you. Good luck. And if you want to catch what's happening at Synopsys Converge, then please do check out the links below.
Thank you. Thank you.